if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you've had a hot flush, so either you're too hot or you're too cold because you've been sweating, whatever the reason, what matters is how we respond to that. So if we can't stop that happening because it's just the time of life that you're in, we can change how we teach your body to respond to it. If we respond with catastrophic thoughts and panic and anxiety about tomorrow, which is all really common, we are teaching our body this is a dangerous situation. There is some sort of threat here at 3 o'clock in the morning. So now I'm teaching my brain to be more alert. So tomorrow morning when it happens again, it's triggered again and again and again. So that's how the cycle carries on.
Hello, so today's guest is Kathryn, an insomnia specialist who helps people break the cycle of chronic broken sleep, especially when nothing else has worked and you've tried loads of things. So we're getting into why so many women in their late 30s and 40s especially suddenly start waking at 3 a.m. You know, whether it's just really hormones and how you actually retrain the brain to sleep again. So circadian health is one of my favourite topics. I feel that female, especially circadian health, is such a vital area for us to understand better. And also I had my own bout of insomnia in my teens and my 20s. So anything about female sleep always lights me up. I hope you get so much from this episode. Hello, today's guest is Kathryn, an insomnia specialist who helps people break the cycle of chronic broken sleep, especially when nothing else has worked. We're talking about why so many women in their late 30s and 40s suddenly start waking at 3 a.m, whether it's really just hormones and how to retrain your brain to sleep again. Kathryn, welcome. I'm very excited for this one. Yeah. Circadian health is one of my favourite topics of all time. So yeah, let's get into it. So how have you got into this space, first of all?
So my background is in psychological services. So I worked in the NHS working with people with mental health problems. And at the time, mental health problems and sleep problems, they very much go hand in hand, but it was kind of considered that if we fix the mental health or the physical health problem, then the sleep problem would just get better. But what we know is actually it's not the case. You know, it can be triggered by a physical or a mental health problem, and then the sleep problem remains when everything else is fixed. So I really enjoyed working with sleep because it was a lot more black and white. If people did certain things, they could retrain their body and their mind to sleep better. So I started there, and then I just have since gone on to specialize only in sleep health, which I find so many people suffer with it. It doesn't have full-blown insomnia in order to need treatment for it. You know, just having a consistent issue with waking up at 3 a.m. can affect all of us. It has such a massive impact on our lives. So yeah, sleep problems are on the rise. They're not going away, I don't think.
No, absolutely on the rise for sure, especially when you get to that point where your stress tolerance is less, like you're past your mid-30s, your progesterone estrogen in decline, like you are going to get different quality sleep. And because the stress tolerance is different, you're more inclined to wake up and be in that kind of lighter sleep.
Yeah. And it becomes a real chicken and egg, doesn't it? You know, am I tired because I'm stressed, or am I not sleeping well because I'm stressed? Like, which is the one that I should be tackling here? And it's a really complicated time for women, I think.
That's really true. Yeah. And what you said as well is really interesting, that you would think when you address the mental illness side of things that your sleep just boom comes back.
Yeah. And it doesn't. And
what's happening there?
So if you think of it a bit like anything can start the fire. So it could be hormones, menopause, it can be a bereavement, life stress. Something can trigger a bout of poor sleep, which is normal. We aren't designed to sleep well when things are going wrong or we're stressed.
Yeah.
So something can start the fire, but actually what we need to focus on is what keeps it burning, because not everybody who has a problem doesn't then go back to having good sleep. So the people who don't go back to having good sleep, what are they doing differently? And that's when we get into actually the habits that we take on in response to not sleeping well, the thoughts, the mindset shifts. So if I am somebody who doesn't sleep well for 3 or 4 days and then I'm really anxious about it, I'm far more likely to get stuck in this cycle than somebody who actually has never really worried about sleep, takes it in their stride and then gets back to normal again. So anything can trigger it. And I think particularly for women in menopause age, it's easy to think, well, there's nothing I can do about it because it was so obviously triggered by menopause. But actually, there will still be things that are going on that you can tweak and change that will improve the quality of your sleep. I'm not saying we can get rid of the symptoms of menopause, but we can certainly do something to mitigate how much they're impacting your sleep.
That's really interesting because, like you say, it's hard to differentiate between the two, how much becomes conditioned insomnia and how much is actually because of hormones and other factors coming in. That's something that I'd say a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, and I think so if we use an example of like waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you've had a hot flush, so either you're too hot or you're too cold because you've been sweating, whatever the reason you're awake, what matters is how we respond to that. So if we can't stop that happening because it's just the time of life that you're in, we can change how we teach your body to respond to it. If we respond with sort of catastrophic thoughts and panic and anxiety about tomorrow, which is all really common, and we all understand that the fear that you haven't slept well is not good, especially if you've got something on. So if we respond like that, what happens is we are teaching our body this is a dangerous situation. There is some sort of threat here at 3 o'clock in the morning. So now I'm teaching my brain to be more alert. So tomorrow morning when it happens again, it's triggered again and again and again. So that's how the cycle carries on. So at that point, we can teach ourselves, okay, this is really unpleasant, but it's not life-threatening. And if I can make my brain understand that shift, I can just not like it and it can not be my preference. Doesn't need to, my body won't respond in the same way with that adrenaline response. So
wow, that's a very good point. In my early 20s, I had another bout of insomnia. I had it in my teens and then again my early 20s. I remember every evening when I'd go for a walk and I'd walk home and I'd just be crying all the way home because I was just dreading the wake-ups in the middle of the night. So it was very much conditioned as well because my body was in such high alert, preempting what was going to happen that night.
And we can't, and with sleep, with any other sort of, if we call it a phobia of not sleeping, which is what you're describing there, like a fear of not being able to sleep. With other fears and phobias, we can technically try and avoid them. So if I'm scared of dogs, for example, I can avoid dog barks. But what will happen is there'll be a dog barking in the distance and it will still trigger it. So I haven't really got rid of it. I've just found a place to hide. When it comes to sleep, we can't even find a place to hide. We have to go and face it night after night after night. So until we shift that sort of fear of why are we afraid of being awake? We're awake all the time. Why am I afraid of being awake in the middle of the night? It's about getting to the root a little bit of what am I worried that's going to happen? And that's not to say that the worst case wouldn't happen. Lots of people do have, I felt like I didn't cope the next day. But there's lots of work we can do on what does not coping actually look like? When realistically are you on that scale? So it's not about pretending to be positive and saying that poor sleep doesn't matter. It's that it's accepting that the way that we respond and feel about sleep is vitally important in curing it, because the more pressure I add to it, the worse it's going to get. So I have to acknowledge that my thoughts and responses matter.
Because my overriding thoughts all the time around that was lack of sleep is so detrimental to my health. And I had nearly that repetitively, mantraed into myself every day that it was a really scary feeling, because I was thinking, I'm deteriorating my health. It'd be the same if at the time I didn't have kids, but it'd be the same if you're saying, I won't be able to take care of my kids properly the next day. And you've put the stakes really high instead of reframing, saying this is like a short period of my life. I will be able to cope through this. The body's extremely resilient. Lack of sleep, women are nearly made for that, especially when it comes to having children. So I think that's a really important part, like the conditioning and you're not rational when you're in that state. You're very irrational. You're very in fight or flight. You're very anxious. So how do people go about that, seeing the logic in when they're in a very irrational space?
So the first thing that I would suggest is, let's say if we take the example of you walking home feeling like that, the first thing is to give it the time that it needs. So when we feel anxious about something, we don't really want to think about it. So we don't think about it sensibly or with any sort of time. We just try and bat it away, or we go down a rabbit hole. So what I suggest to everyone is, if you are anxious about sleep, we have to face it. The quicker we face it, the less powerful any fear becomes. So you get a pen and paper every day and you write down, what is it I'm worried about? And don't just write, I'm worried about not sleeping. Keep asking yourself why. So what, all the way down to the bottom. Because if you end up with, because I think I'm going to fail at my job if I don't get enough sleep, that makes sense. Now I understand why my adrenaline is being triggered, because that feels like a massive threat to me, my family, and everybody around me. So we need to get down to that. This is what's going to happen. And once you've aired that in itself is really therapeutic, because then there'll be a part of it that goes, well, actually, what are the chances of that happening? And is there another way of looking at this? And there's lots of sort of prompts that we can use there to help uncover actually what's most realistic. And okay, what would I do then? So I always encourage people to think about, okay, let's say worst case happens and you do lose your job. What next? Let's play it out. Is it the end of the world? Is that the last day that you will be on this earth if you lose that job? No. Okay, right. So there's something after it. So it's not about pretending to be positive. It's just about finding out what's really the matter here. And if we start to do that, then at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's far less powerful because you've listened to your brain. And a good example that I give is around, if, let's say, me and you are walking along and there's a cliff ahead of us, and I haven't seen it, but you have. So you're tapping me on the shoulder and saying, just watch out for the cliff. And I ignore you and I start walking a bit faster. you're more frantic and you're trying to get me to listen to you. And I go even faster and I'm still not listening to you. By now you're frantic, you're panicking, you're trying to get my attention. And then I turn around and say, oh, it's just a mirage. There's not really a cliff there. I'm right. There is no cliff. There's no danger. You can calm down. But you can't calm down until I fully face you and listen to what it is you're trying to tell me. And if I allow my brain to do that, if I say, here you go, here's 15 minutes, tell me what you're worried about, then I can relax because I go, okay, now I can work out, is any of this life or death? Is me failing in that meeting tomorrow life or death? Because I'm not saying it's great, but if I'm not going to die at the end of it, I don't need the adrenaline response. I need a different set of tools and I'm going to problem solve it instead. Does that make sense?
Massive, yeah. And it makes a lot of sense because fear of the unknown, but you're actually tapping into what the unknown potentially is. So
Yes.
It seems less like the unknown because you're saying, okay, this is actually what could happen, X, Y, and Z. This is the black and white of it. Let's look at best and worst case scenarios. Then it's not totally unknown, catastrophic territory. Because that's what was for me. I was never doing that. So I was in this realm of complete, the unfamiliar feeling, but you want familiarity and you want knowledge of what's ahead. So I think that's like very, very good advice for somebody in that.
Knowledge is power, isn't it? The more I can learn about what I'm scared of, the more I can decide if it's real, and then I can make a plan. If it is true, then I need to do something about it. So you're right, it's that fear. And what our brain does is it cleverly can picture how we will feel in order to stop us doing something. So I know how it would feel to put my hand in a fire, so therefore I don't do it. So my brain is clever at protecting me, but what it also means is that I can feel just as anxious and scared about failing an exam as I would do if I actually failed the exam. In fact, probably worse. Actually having the bad thing happen isn't as bad as the fear of the bad thing happening. So your brain is clever. It's built like that to help you survive. But when it comes to sleep, suddenly you've built up this fear around something, which is a natural process. We've built up all the catastrophic reasons why it's going to be so detrimental. And now your body is just going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because you're trying to make me do it, but you're also telling me that it's dangerous. So first step, get it out of your head, write it down, investigate, face it. And a lot of people will say, I don't want to think about the worst case because it makes me feel worse. And my answer to that is, you can feel low level bad all the time, or you can face it, feel really bad for 5 or 6 minutes, and then your body will adjust, your body will start to recalibrate, you'll realize there's no immediate threat, and suddenly that thought's not as powerful anymore. So we have to face the stuff. The most uncomfortable bits are the best bits to face.
That's so true. And teaming that then with more of a sense of safety cues and regulation techniques throughout the day, you're again going into more logical mode and you're seeing what it really is. And I think a lot of people, because now they're relying on Aura, Apple Watch, sleep scores, they're so anxious about that data as well, that's probably driving a huge amount of sleep anxiety. That's one thing I always completely stayed away from. Number one, because I heard a lecture before, now this is a few years ago, so I don't know how true this still is, but how inaccurate all that data is when it comes to sleep quality and actually the REM cycles you're in. But also how that would provoke so much anxiety in me from a past of been really, really struggled with sleep.
Yeah.
So I think, would you say that would backfire a lot when people use that data a lot?
Completely. I mean, for me, if you are somebody who's interested in data and you're a relatively good sleeper, then it's interesting. For somebody who has a sleep problem, steer clear, because you're absolutely right. I can't, A, how accurate is it? And B, waking up and reading that I only got 50% sleep score and therefore, and the advice surrounding them is just so inaccurate. So I would love to speak to Aura or Whoop or someone and say, look, if we're going to tell people they didn't sleep badly, let's at least then show them how to do it. But instead, if the advice is you didn't sleep very well, you shouldn't socialize tonight or you shouldn't go to the gym, I completely disagree. Don't let last night affect what I'm doing today, because tomorrow night's going to be even worse, because now I'm really paranoid. I have to prove that I can carry on and I can cope, because like you said, we are built to cope on periods of lost sleep. That's normal. And so absolutely, I for anyone listening who has anxiety around sleep, just don't track it with trackers. There's nothing to be gained. And it would be a really interesting research project to do if we gave false positives, if we told people they'd slept really well. It would be interesting to see how the set was that day. What do they achieve when they believe they slept well? How energized will we feel? When
the placebo effect in that will be very, very powerful. If you saw a score of, wow, I got into deep REM sleep at the right time and I came into my light sleep at the right time, people will be really motivated to even improve their sleep hygiene even more and their regulation and everything that goes about it. But I think there's, off the back of that, then when you look at people who have had insomnia and poor sleep for so long, they're trying to retrain the brain to sleep through the night again. And what are the things you see people do right and wrong in that? Because I know when I was there, and I could have had a lot of shortcuts, but I took the long route because I didn't know how to move away from intense sleep anxiety and insomnia, or even somebody listening just 3 a.m. wake ups regularly. How do you retrain the brain then when you're doing the other factors right, but it's just the brain part?
Okay. And I think that's where sleep hygiene can become problematic, is that if you have a consistent sleep issue and the only things you have at your disposal are sleep hygiene. So I've given up all the caffeine, I don't drink alcohol, I don't ever do anything, I go to bed early, I have a long wind down. All that's doing is adding a lot of pressure to the system that is already not working. So the way that insomnia develops from a body clock perspective is when I wake up in the morning, I start building a sleep drive. So I build this momentum throughout the day. So my circadian rhythm is I wake up in the morning, I start building that momentum, that appetite for sleep. When I get into bed at nighttime, I fall asleep quickly, I take it all back and I wake up the next morning. And what happens is when that goes wrong, so let's say I'm stressed about something and I don't fall asleep, if I didn't attach any meaning to that, it would probably be okay. But if tomorrow night I then go to bed early to try and fix it, suddenly I'm now in bed too early, my drive is not high enough, my body clock doesn't really understand why I've gone to bed at 9:30 instead of 10:30. And now I'm becoming a bit more vigilant. So you can see how even that one change has started to mess up the pattern even further. So what people tend to do wrong is things like that. So we go to bed too early in a response to trying to get better sleep, when actually the first thing I would advise anyone to do who's not getting good sleep quality is go to bed later and get up earlier. So take the stress away from it and stop trying. So if you don't fall asleep until midnight, but you're in bed at 10, you're in bed too early. So push your bedtime back, set your alarm clock in the morning. And what we're doing then is we're creating a little bit of sort of momentum that your body clock can now get on board with. It starts to understand, okay, you're not going to go to bed any earlier than midnight. You're not getting up any later than 6. These are my only hours. So quality before quantity. We want to get 5, 6 quality hours, and then we look at getting more. So, yeah, go ahead.
Just something I learned too late was how important not your sleep time is, but your wake up time. Because that's obviously driving the time you're going to go to sleep. So your sleep time becomes more predictable when you have a very clear wake up time. So, setting the alarm for 6 every morning, your clock's going to start adjusting the other side. So I think that's something I did in reverse, where I was saying I have to be in bed by 9 o'clock. Yeah. But I was letting myself sleep in because my sleep was so fragmented, and it was like the reverse of what I should have done. So I think that's a really, really good thing to think about, your wake up.
What you did is so common because your driving priority becomes, I need opportunity. I need to increase my opportunity for sleep because I'm not getting enough. But actually, if you decrease your opportunity for sleep, your body has to get on board with it quicker because you aren't giving it any opportunity. As soon as I start falling asleep quicker and I start waking a bit less, or I fall back to sleep quicker at 3 a.m., my vigilance reduces and my body starts to understand what's happening. And then I can open up that window a little bit. So this is one of the biggest sort of misconceptions, I think, when people are talking about how to improve sleep, is this idea of go to bed at the same time every night, make sure you've got a long wind down routine, don't go to bed too late. It's not actually accurate, because if I'm going to bed at 9 o'clock, but it's the wrong time, there's nothing being gained here. I'm better off going to bed at midnight and getting 6 good hours than I would be at 9 and doing what you did, which is staying in later and trying to get it back. So you're absolutely right. Set an alarm. If you're struggling for sleep consistently, set an alarm and stick to it. Regardless of how badly you slept, keep getting up at that time in the morning, because you will improve the quality of the next night every time you do that. You're building that appetite up for sleep.
That's one mistake. What are other mistakes a lot of people do when trying to fix their sleep? Because I was thinking today, for a lot of my clients, they're not somebody that is just like needs better sleep hygiene. They're already doing their wind down routine. They're cutting out the caffeine or having it earlier in the day. They're trying to regulate more throughout the day. Like, they're really on top of this. Yes. So what are them mistakes for someone that's not a beginner? What are they making?
Yeah, so if we run through some of those changes they're making. So caffeine doesn't need to be considered the devil in this situation. In fact, I think if someone is trying to improve their sleep, caffeine can be used quite wisely. So if you are struggling and you're tired during the day because of your sleep, giving up caffeine is not making your life any easier or more enjoyable for you if you enjoy it. So a couple of coffees earlier in the day and in the morning is not, for most people, going to have any impact on their bedtime sleep, unless you're specifically very sensitive to it and you know that. For the majority of people, it's not going to have any problem. So reintroduce things that you enjoy. So think back to the time when you slept really well. What did you do then? And think about, okay, what am I giving up because I'm trying to improve my sleep? So if you are having a chamomile tea at night, but you don't really like it, you think it's just going to help you sleep, or if you're having a bath at night, but you don't particularly love having a bath at night, nothing can make sleep happen. All we can do is make the conditions right internally, and then it can happen. So in that example that you gave, when people give up a lot of stuff, what it does is psychologically, it makes sleep quite miserable. It makes the whole thing a bit of a regime and a challenge and something to dread. So make sleep a smaller part of your life. And so the things to abide by that will work are go to bed later and wake up earlier. If you can't sleep, leave the bedroom altogether, or give up and sit up. So if you are, and I'm not talking about if you're lying in bed and you're dozy and you're comfortable, that's fine. If you're lying in bed, if you're hot and bothered, you're frustrated, you're ruminating, that's not a sleep appropriate environment. It's not a compatible sleep behavior. So get up, go downstairs, read a book you enjoy, listen to something, put the telly on for a bit. And when you feel sleepy again, then go back to bed. You're still going to get up at your same alarm clock the next morning anyway, and you're going to get on with your day and go through until the next night. So it's about taking away the things that are keeping us awake. So time in bed, too much pressure. You don't need a long wind down routine. So you're far better off staying up, watching some telly, spending time with a partner, going out for a walk, going to bed a bit later, and just literally clean your teeth, put your pajamas on, read your book for 5 seconds. Whatever it is that suits you. We don't have to do all that stuff unless...
That's interesting, because that narrative is so pushed on social media, where you're meant to have an extremely rigid, really hygienic sleep wind down. And there's such an overemphasis on it, which creates even more sleep anxiety. That's exactly what people do when you're struggling with sleep. Okay, I'm not going to socialize. I'm going to stay on my own all evening with dim lights, reading a book. I'm going to go to bed early. And you are cutting out a lot of things that would have been fun for you in the past. Like, even, like you say, you put a huge amount of emphasis on the coffee. And there's a lot of little things that actually just create even more stress in the body, which is exactly the opposite you want if you want to get good sleep.
Yeah. And it's not to say that hygiene, lifestyle hygiene isn't important, because it is. Of course, if we all drank less coffee, exercise more, relax more, that would help. And it would certainly help you feel better about not sleeping as well. But in terms of actual consistent sleep issues, we've got to be resetting that body clock and changing our mindset. That's not a sort of a chamomile tea before bed scenario. So I think anyone who's doing everything right, this is your sign to be able to go, okay, I can actually let some of this stuff go. If, I'm taking 1 million supplements and I still don't think, you probably don't need them. So don't bother with all of that stuff. Cut it all out. Remember what you used to enjoy. What did you used to do in the evenings? If you enjoy socializing and going out, then do it, because that is really important in terms of mental health, physical health, how we feel day to day. So I don't know, I can't remember the guy's name. Who's the guy with the perfect sleep and lifestyle?
Ryan Johnson.
Right, Johnson. So I know when people talk about him, and he goes to bed at 8:30 and so on. And I do get that it's perfect. What I don't understand is why you would do that, because
he's making
life. So for normal people, I'm like, enjoy life as well. Going to bed early every night is not what this is all meant to be about. So take the pressure off. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I think his last meal of the day is something like 11 a.m. He's obviously, his whole lifestyle is this because it's his full career. And he probably has a lot of circumstances where it's nearly enjoyable for him. For the majority of people, it's obviously not going to be at all. And I think that's the point as well with male versus female sleep. I think there's so many nuances to both. And I really noticed, like, for me, it was a matter of cutting out alcohol long term and caffeine, because I'm very, very caffeine sensitive. Yeah. And I noticed that alcohol was just something that just really deteriorates the quality of my sleep. So there was things that I went fairly extreme with, but again, it's highly subjective because of your lifestyle, your stress load, your pressure. And even like that, I tried every supplement under the sun. I found the 1 or 2 that worked really well for me and continued on with them. So it's like also been a lot more flexible. Like that works for Brian. It's probably not going to work for me and Kathryn, but it works for Brian. Yeah. And it's so subjective. That's the other thing. It's very hard when someone says, well, what do I do to fix my sleep? Yeah, there's a bit of guesswork here and there's a bit of trial and error. You have to find a system, and you also have to find the deeper root cause of why this is happening. For me, it was very much nervous system driven in my late teens, early 20s, a lot of stress, be it from lack of nutrients to overthinking, all different stressors. So for everyone, it's so different. For the person in perimenopause, it might be, okay, you don't have the stress buffer of the progesterone anymore. That's really negatively impacting your sleep. So I think that the guesswork probably is a really important, not even guesswork, root cause work for you when you're working with someone. Is there a good bit of digging to actually really understand the cause of it? And what are the very prevalent ones you see often?
So I think that when we ask questions about how people approach sleep, you can learn a lot from how perfect they are about it. So a lot of people who I see are like, I do everything right. So that's number one problem, is I'm doing everything right and it doesn't work. So we know there's a lot of pressure there. And stress, I would say for women, stress is a big one. So you can't outsleep stress. So when I'm working with somebody who's clearly a million miles an hour all day and has a lot of things going on, we're not going to be able to make that sleep restorative without addressing that. So as you said, in your circumstances, sleep is a symptom because everything else needs fixing as well. So I will always say to people, here are some things that we would do to set the foundations. This is how we would reset your body clock, and this is the mindset work we're going to do. But alongside that, you have to acknowledge that the stress levels, or perhaps HRT or hormones, we're going to have to look at those as well, because it's part of this bigger picture. So I'm always focusing with people on what is maintaining and keeping this sleep pattern poor, and how do we take those things and make them more healthy, make those patterns more healthy again. But that might not be the whole picture. You know, I've worked with people who have gone from having terrible sleep to good sleep, and they say, I don't feel any better. And that's because we can't outsleep that. We have to acknowledge that there's other stuff going on as well. So that's why this sort of blanket approach of just good sleep hygiene and being super strict is going to work. It really doesn't. And, you know, the happier we are, the better we feel anyway, even if we're not getting as much sleep. And to your point earlier on, you know, we have to have been designed to cope with periods of poor sleep. Otherwise, why were babies designed not able to sleep through? It doesn't make sense. So, you know, there is women who've had 10, 20 babies and lived to be 100 years old and had happy, healthy lives. So I feel really sorry for women, because it's just sort of another stick to be beaten with, that now I've got to worry about all those sleepless nights I had because I was doing, you know, up with a baby, and now I've got to worry about the impact on my brain. It's not right. We, you know, we have to take the pressure off, and we can only do what we can do.
That's such a huge part. Like, there's so much people out there saying is, I think that one of the biggest things for me was when the twins were like 3 months old, people used to look at me with such like pity and saying, oh my God, hopefully soon they'll sleep. Like, what a disaster. Isn't that terrible? And I was like, geez, are my kids broken? Like, are they supposed to sleep at 3 months old? And I had, the more people asked me, are they sleeping yet? And they didn't sleep till they were a year old, which actually is very average and fine for twins. But I was so panicked because the narrative around sleep, oh, you poor thing, your life is ruined now and you're going to be really unhealthy. It was almost like that.
Yeah, and we have a lot of new parents join the program, and I feel really sorry for them, because when I had my first, we didn't have iPhones. I didn't have an iPhone, so I didn't scroll or anything in the night. So I didn't compare. I didn't know. And I feel really bad for them, because not only are there often now two parents who are both working pretty soon after having the baby, they've got a lot of commitments and pressure to get back to sleep so that they, you know, so that they can perform. And I think, gosh, we weren't designed for that. Like, it's what you're trying to achieve is just so beyond expectations. So a lot of that work I'm doing with them is, this will be okay in the end. You have to take the pressure off. You have to accept that you're just going to be a bit more tired, that this isn't going to work as quick as you need it to, because there's no forcing this. There's too many variables now. So try and just step back and enjoy, you know, what you can, and, you know, accept that it's hard. But I agree. I think the pressure on parents now about sleep is so unrealistic. I mean, I remember my mum being like, I don't know why you think that you would get more sleep than this. She was really surprised that I had such high expectations. But she's like, that's what babies are, that's what happens.
Yeah, this is the way it goes, you know. And it is then, there's a unicorn of your friendship group that the child sleeps from day one, and you put all the focus on that because that's what you think is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And which is a dangerous one.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Instagram and social, it does allow us to compare. So, you know, when I see these sleep posts about, you know, this is what you have to do to sleep perfectly, I think this is just a nightmare for somebody with anxiety and insomnia, because they're going to follow that, and it's not going to work, because that's not the answer. That's not the root cause. So I think if you're struggling, my advice would be CBT for insomnia is a insomnia approach. Following hormones and advice that works for that is that approach. So make sure you are treating the thing with the right treatment program and the correct expert, because there's so much noise. And just because someone has a massive following and they sleep well themselves doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to help people sleep. So be careful what you listen to and how much you take on and how much you spend.
Yeah, because I remember recently a friend had said to me that her partner was really experiencing poor sleep, and, you know, the very typical, his method was go to bed early, you know, his sleep hygiene was immaculate. He was doing, quote unquote, everything right. And he was very close to spending, I think it was €6,000 on a sleep specialist. But really, again, what he then went to do was CBT, because it wasn't so much anything as much to do with his circadian rhythm, then as much to do with his thought process and around sleep, and then label he had in himself of long-term been a bad sleeper. And then he would get bouts of bad sleep.
And that narrative is so important. I always talk to people about, actually, we have to think like a good sleeper if you want to sleep well. So again, it's not about being unrealistic. But if I was to, say to a child every day from the day it was born, oh, you're a terrible sleeper, you're going to feel terrible tomorrow, how are you going to cope? There's no way that child could be a good sleeper, regardless of their physiology. And it's the same with adults. So it's not to be unrealistic, but if someone is saying, oh, I just know that I've ruined tomorrow, we'll say, okay, let's look at that statement. How can we challenge that? How could we reframe it? And a really good tool is to think of a scale. So if we think of 0 to 10, 0 being the day is ruined, 10 being best day ever, what does actually ruined look like? And if we list what ruined looked like, and then we go, okay, where am I on that scale? Well, actually, it's probably a 5 because I'm going to be a bit narky and I'm not going to enjoy it as much. Okay, so it's a 5 out of 10. That's not ruined. Ruined is I didn't even get out of bed. I didn't feed anybody, burned the house down, and I crashed the car. That's ruined. I didn't do any of that stuff. That's not going to happen. So it's about just bringing in sort of the grey areas a bit with that catastrophic thinking and, learning that it's fueling the fire. It's keeping it going because it's keeping my body in this state of being awake at night is something to be scared of. It's a terrible thing. I can't let it happen. So therefore I've got to fight it. And then I end up being awake anyway.
I did that kind of identity work for a while of having that label for a good while that I'm just a bad sleeper. And that's the way I am to now. I suppose the last 4 years I've had really good sleep. But again, realizing that in the future, there's times of nearly everyone's life where their sleep declines, especially like you said, grief and different stages of life. Your sleep will decline at certain periods of time and chapters of your life. So acknowledging that and kind of rolling with it is really important. I had this idea, and my sister and dad would be really heavy sleepers. Like they would sleep on an airplane, train, no problem. And I had that comparison. I was like, why can't you do that? Why don't you sleep through loud noises? And I think that's another thing, you're comparing to those around you who are like, oh yeah, I got 8 or 9 hours. That's what I always get. And it's very normal for them. And understanding that, hold on a second, that doesn't mean you're a good or bad sleeper. It means you're at different stages of your life.
Yeah. And people respond to different things differently. And, there are lots of people who sleep really well, but don't necessarily feel better for it. There's lots of people who are really stressed, but they might sleep well. They don't feel any better for it. And vice versa. There's people who don't get great sleep, but they feel good because they look after everything else. So it's always about, like, we do need to try and prioritize sleep, but not to the point where the prioritization of it is what's causing the problem. So that narrative is really important. How do you talk to yourself about sleep? And, a simple question to ask is, could anyone sleep well if they thought what I just thought? If I went to bed tonight thinking I'm going to ruin tomorrow, there's no way I'd sleep tonight. But I don't have that belief system. And I've always been a good sleeper. I know that even if I sleep well, sometimes I'm still irritable. I'm still tired. I still ruin the day because I've, done something wrong. So it's not this hard and fast rule. And I think when you're a poor sleeper, what happens is you get into that mindset of, if I could sleep well, everything would be right. I'd feel better. I'd look better. I'd cope with everything. And the reality is there's a few more things that need to go into that as well. So prioritize sleep, but just watch that narrative. And we do a lot of work on that actually with people because it's really important.
Yeah. And really understanding yourself as well, the way you react and respond to poor sleep is really important. Like you see some people, they get 3 or 4 hours and they can do the day the next day and they can get on with it, because I think there's a big part of this, which is the power of your word. And that was a big thing for me in hindsight. My words were very negative around sleep, and there's huge weight and power in that because your body's listening, your nervous system is listening, and it's responding to that. And your predictions often come true, like placebo effect stuff. You are kind of manifesting. For me, it was definitely a decline in sleep quality because that was my expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, what we think is what we feel. And if I think I'm a bad sleeper, I'm going to feel like a bad sleeper, and I'm going to have the physical impact of that. So really being able to address your belief system is important with sleep. And people will go, I just don't know why I'm not sleeping. And they'll say the reasons they don't know, but then they'll back it up with all of this narrative around, I've never slept well. I've never got more than this. I always feel this. And I'm like, that's the reason you don't sleep well. Not because physically your body can't, because actually you believe it doesn't work. And a bit like with depression, if you have somebody with a history of depression, a bad day to them means more than it does to somebody without. So if you have a bad day and you used to be depressed, your fear is, I'm getting depressed again. It's the same with insomnia. If I have a history of poor sleep, I can't take a bad night in my stride. And that's what we have to teach people to do. So if I could wave a magic wand, it wouldn't be that you sleep well every night. It would be that you can cope with whatever night you've had, because that's actually real life. Because you're absolutely right. We're all going to have nights where we don't sleep well. That's just the way it is. Maybe not Brian Johnson, but everybody else is going to have a night. I mean, for me, the pressure that he's got like 365 days of perfect sleep, how he gets to sleep at all blows my mind, because the fear of breaking that pattern. Yeah. So other than him, most of us are going to have the odd night, but it's fine. We can cope with the odd night. It doesn't matter. It's about nipping it in the bud with the thoughts early. What am I worried about? How can I minimize this sort of adrenaline response? And then making simple changes like, I'm not going to go to bed early tonight to try and rectify this. If I can't sleep, I'm going to get up. I'll make sure I've got a good book, something that I want to read, and I'll just do that instead. People always worry about holidays. They don't sleep well on holiday. First of all, that's really normal, like, especially if you've got kids and you're grown up, like, we don't tend to just be able to sleep wherever we, put our head down. So firstly, it's normal. And second, I might move the focus away from sleep. Why did you want to go on holiday in the first place? What's a good thing about being here? Being tired can't ruin a holiday. Only how you feel about being tired can ruin the holiday. So write it down, get it all out of your head, and then move your focus to what you can control and what you can enjoy. There's a lot of work that we do around real problems and hypothetical problems. So sleep worries are usually what ifs. So what if I this? What if my health suffers? And it's not to say they don't feel just as bad, because as I say, the brain can make you feel bad. But it is important to acknowledge the difference. So a real problem is I have lost my job. So if I've lost my job, I can make a plan to get a new one. If my fear is that I might lose my job, now I need to accept that actually that hasn't yet happened, hasn't happened in the past. What's more likely to happen is this, but right now in this moment, there's nothing more I can do than what I'm doing. And getting into that habit is really important, because we have loads of what if problems. We only ever have a few real ones, and it's the what if ones that are keeping us awake at night. So deal with them during the day. Don't let them come at nighttime.
Yeah, I really noticed as well going through that journey. And at the time I was studying circadian health, and I was understanding, okay, the days I'm irrational and don't put my education into practice are the days I'm really sleep deprived, and more so in fight or flight, because, being sleep deprived, you're, like we said earlier, you're not seeing the rational side of things. So I was realizing the more I was in that response, the more negatively I thought, the more my thoughts spiraled. And it was like I had to change my state to change the way I was thinking. I couldn't outthink it. I had to feel different. So I was really trying to do things through the day where the body had safety cues, but also there was more fun. So I was realizing everything was getting so serious because of the gravity of not having good sleep. So I had to bring flow state into the day. I had to bring more enjoyable activities, more being around people that are regulating, a bit of co-regulation, because like that, when I was doing CBT and I was doing different therapy as well at the time, and I couldn't seem to get a handle on it. And then it was like an aha moment when I was like, no, you won't be able to get a handle on it when you're stuck in freeze, fight or flight, fawn response all the time. You have to change your energy and your state so you can begin to think a little bit more rationally, like doing that exercise. For me at the time when I was really in that negative state of mind, the worst case scenario, I would have felt that's going to happen. Whereas when I was in a more regulated state, I was thinking, okay, that's very unlikely to happen. I was in that more rational way of thinking and logical way of thinking. So I think there's so much to be said as well for that regulation part, for the part of you getting into flow state, for you really understanding that isolation is a huge thing that's going to make you feel the sleep is taking over your life. When I had more conversations with my dad, who's like a really relaxed and laid back person, he's like, this isn't the end of the world. This happens to everyone. And having that person to just bounce ideas off, co-regulate with, was so powerful. But when I was on my own, not wanting to talk about it because it was so painful, it was very isolating feeling.
Yeah.
I wish I did that earlier.
You were avoiding facing it because it was uncomfortable, and you're doing it on your own. And that's why 3 o'clock in the morning is so awful, because we're not rational. You're isolated. It's dark. It's miserable. The weather's been terrible. So you know that's going on outside, and it's a terrible time to be trying to deal with anything. So don't do it during the daytime when there's a bit of sunlight. Sit outside, pen and paper, move your body. You're absolutely right. Change the state around this, around the way that your mind has started to relate to sleep, because we need to get on the same team as sleep. It's like fighting quicksand. Otherwise, you can't battle your way out of it. You have to get on your own team. You've got to be kinder to yourself. You've got to accept that you're struggling and accept that it's okay that you're worried about it. Your body is trying to tell you something. You just need to teach your body that actually, yes, I've got things to worry about, but it's not life or death. And it's not what I think it is in this moment. So dealing with it on your own in the middle of the night is the worst time. So don't, when you're ruminating, just leave the bedroom, put the telly on, do something else. Don't stay in bed in that state, because it never works.
And that's the thing at the time, that's what, I used to go down to the sitting room, but a lot of the time what worked for me was doing a brain dump in my journal and then reading straight away, because I didn't want my overthinking to start spiraling. So I interrupted it with, doing my kind of bit more of diaphragmatic breathing throughout my reading, because that was telling the nervous system I'm more safe, plus distracting my overthinking analytical mind at 3 a.m, which just completely spirals into the most negative, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And it's like finding that sweet spot for you. It did not work for me to put on the TV or to go to a different part of the house. I felt I just woke up even more. But for some people, that's essential, because you don't want to associate your bedroom with you're not sleeping.
Yeah. So you found, and I think the key part of what you're saying there is you did the brain dump, and that's really important. So when people are trying to use mindfulness and breathing, that works brilliantly, but not if we've not done the step before, which is I have to acknowledge what it is that I'm worried about. So the brain dump's really important, and you don't have to be rational during that brain dump. It's everything. However, in fact, the more irrational, the better. Get it all out, and then move on to changing how you feel. But I think that's the bit that we all skip because it's so uncomfortable. Nobody likes to sit with a feeling that's making them feel panicky or anxious. But if we sit with it, we learn this is as bad as it gets. 10 out of 10 anxiety is awful. But there's nothing else. I don't pass out. I'm not going to be sick. I don't die. The world doesn't end 10 out of 10. And if I can teach my body that, then I can say, this is just really unpleasant and I hate it. A bit like a hot flush. If we don't allow a hot flush to just finish, it becomes panicky and we start to feel like we can't cope. So you have to just sit with it. Just allow it to figure itself out and realize it's horribly unpleasant. That's all that it is. And it's
that's
the same
what
anxiety.
A therapist had said to me, you're doing that brain dump on one side of your page, you're ruminating, and give yourself the timer of 5 to 10 minutes. You're worry as much as you want, you can catastrophize as much as you want, but then you're parking it. And then it's more possible for me to have done the meditation or the mindfulness or the deep breathing and the reading, because for a period I was noticing, wow, I really like the book I'm reading, but I couldn't, I'd have to read the page 10 times because I kept going back to the overthinking and analysing, what's my to-do list for tomorrow, what can go wrong.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're acknowledging it, writing it down really works for me. You can reflect, but writing it down is so important. And even for a long time, and I still do, beside my bed, I keep a notepad. So at nighttime, when I think of inevitably all the things I need to do the next day, put it onto that. That alone improved my sleep so much because I wasn't trying to remember it the next morning. Yeah. I wasn't that night saying, okay, you have to keep, putting this in a loop in your brain so you remember tomorrow, throw it on the piece of paper, makes a massive difference, especially for like the type A women that are always overthinking. And that's I suppose a lot, and you're probably the same, clients that are want to do everything to a T. They're very, very like rigid when they have a plan. They want to execute it 100%. And that was me. And that was to the detriment of my sleep. And I think there's a lot more people now speaking about that kind of drilled in narrative we had of you must have a rigid morning and evening routine is going out the window, because people are realizing that life is not rigid. We're not robotic. No. Every day is a different day. You have to be flexible. And that for me, I think was one thing that kept me stuck, was saying I have to do this every morning. I have to get my, eyes in the natural daylight for X amount of minutes. I have to go for my walk. I must eat this blood sugar balancing breakfast at nighttime. I must do this wind down routine. And it became another thing to my task list to stress me out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what happens with sleep hygiene, isn't it? It's like a list of things I have to do to sleep well, resulting in poor sleep, meaning I've got to add something else to my list and I've got to try something else. Maybe it was the wrong list. And that, placebo is very effective. So if you take a Nitol, it might work the first night because you believe it was going to work and you've done something different. But by night 4 or 5, the reason it maybe doesn't work anymore is because it wasn't really making a difference. It was just you believed it did. And now you don't believe that it's going to. So it changes. So it's definitely about being more flexible. And certainly as you go through menopause, you do feel differently. And I think that beating yourself up because you don't do the same level of exercise that you did when you didn't feel this way, those are all playing into this idea that you're not good enough and you're not doing enough. And it's a lot of the sort of the brain dump work for me is around just notice how you speak to yourself and ask, could you be happy if that's how you talk to them? Would you ever talk to your child that way? Would you talk to your mum, your sister? And the answer is no. Of course, we would never speak like that. So sleep problems are built up by can be triggered by lots of different things. But the biggest maintenance factor is how we are responding to ourselves and the sleep problem. It sounds like what you did is you weren't very sort of focused on, okay, I'm going to fix it. But the harder we try and fix sleep, the worse it gets. We have to back off. We have to just do a few things, going to bed later, waking up early, leaving the room, managing my stress, and just step back and then let it settle.
I think when you're at that point as well, you have to say to yourself, I actually have to take this off the pedestal and I have to prioritize other things because this is way too consuming. It's completely consuming every thought of my day and even timing of everything. And it becomes just a really stressful experience. And I think as well from so many clients, even in 50s, 60s, 70s, I think a lot of women expect to have like 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, to be up most of the night. And like I've heard that a lot of times saying, your sleep just goes when you go into your 50s. What's your take on that? Because obviously physiologically we do change. Our hormones do change. The sleep cycle changes. We're in lighter sleep more. What's how do you really understand that? Because I think there is a quite negative narrative around this is your lot and that's the way it is.
Yeah. I think that there are reasons why when the older we get, the worse sleep gets. So usually, we can't lie in as well. Alcohol massively disrupts your sleep. Hormones massively disrupt your sleep. So there's a lot of things, like a perfect storm of reasons that interrupt it. And then maybe we get stuck in a cycle where because it was interrupted, we never got it back again. And now I don't really believe I can sleep very well. I do the things wrong and that's how it carries on. So we know that as we get older, people tend to get into deep sleep for less time. So they take less deep sleep. Whether we could confirm that they definitely don't need it, I don't think that we do confirm that. It does seem to be accepted that it can deteriorate. But I guess the bit that I would challenge is, yes, it can be triggered more easily. The more vulnerable we become as we get older to sleep issues, absolutely. But is it that you are doing things that are keeping it going? That's the bit to focus on. So women, I speak to them the same as you all the time, who are only getting 4 or 5 hours. And they believe that's all they can have. But actually, there are things that they're doing. There are, they're checking the time. That's a big one. If you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the first thing you do is check the time. Really small win. Don't look at the time. We don't need to know the time. It keeps that problem going. So there are things that people can do. But I think women do suffer more from poor sleep than men. And is that physiological, or is it because actually from a mental load perspective and a stress and a being tuned into the children waking, those kind of things, we condition ourselves to sleep differently as well. So there's a lot of different reasons. But don't give up. Don't give up if there are changes that you can make.
I was challenged on that recently because I stayed with a friend and we were talking about our mom's sleep, and her mom is the same as mine, in her mid-60s, and she was saying her mom sleeps pretty much 8 hours every night still and has like really good quality sleep. She's refreshed every morning. And I was almost like, wow, like I saw that in clients, but I can't believe that's just normal for some people, because the clients I've seen have worked hard to get to that point and they've done things to get to that point. But there's obviously lots of people that also, never got into the place where they saw themselves as poor sleepers or took it as this is just the way it is. And she's obviously has a lifestyle as well that supports that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's important, I think, to have hope with it too, because I would hope in my 60s I'd have enough tools and knowledge and understanding of myself to get the best sleep I can, and to know all the things we spoke about is absolutely invaluable.
Yeah. It's funny, my mum's exactly the same. My mum sleeps really well. She has a coffee before bed every night. In fact, she only drinks coffee. I don't think I've ever seen her have a glass of water. So there's nothing about that should promote good sleep, but she just sleeps really well. So we are all different, and there is hope. And I think that I recently, my sleep for the first, it's always struggled if I was going through a period of stress, but hormones were interrupting my sleep, and it was a very different type of sleep where I just felt like I was hot and sweaty and half awake all night. The difference is I was able to just go, this is not me. This is not related to, I can sleep. I know I can sleep well. I just need to fix this otherwise. And I think that's the key. It's the panic. It's the lack of education. It's this sort of fear that it's going to be like this forever. That's what, once those claws are in, That's sleep problems can get worse and worse. So I really want people to kind of know, like, there is definitely some stuff that you probably aren't doing that's really simple that will make some big changes, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. It doesn't have to involve long routines or learning new skills or anything like that. It's just understanding what actually makes us sleep and what keeps the problem going.
It is a bit of detective work, and whenever I do it with clients, it's funny. The usual thing that tips them into good sleep is the thing that they kind of neglected because they didn't think it was significant. So there's so many things, because we always jump to the same stereotypical ones, like we said, cut out your caffeine, go to bed earlier, and all them kind of ones that might work more so for a man, but the woman really needs to deal with having the mental rest and not carrying the mental load and ruminating on it. That's obviously a huge factor, that you need to interrupt that pattern. And I think that's the work a lot of the time, that's exactly what you said, that's extremely effective for the sleep piece. Not all the other things, like a smaller percentage than we probably anticipate. Because that's probably where I put a lot of my work, was the sleep hygiene. But I should have been putting more emphasis of my work on the nervous system, on safety cues, on, journaling or therapy or CBT like things. You don't, if you want, you can look it up on YouTube, certain activities and exercises to allow you to understand your mental traps. So all the mental traps for me were assuming I was going to have a bad night's sleep, catastrophizing about how bad my health was going to be, saying that this is the rest of my life, saying it's only going to get worse when I hit perimenopause. And also in perimenopause, I preempt, I am going to have that stage where I'm like, wow, my sleep's, really declined right now. But hold on, we're going to look at that situation at that time and find solutions for that unique situation. Maybe it's because work pressure is more, maybe it's because, X, Y, and Z reason. So then you're able to tackle where you're at. Because I won't be able to use the same tools I used in my teens and 20s and early 30s that I will in perimenopause, and knowing the toolbox changes.
And now you have that knowledge, don't you, that you can sleep well. It's your attitude that has to change, and it's about bringing it back to the present. Because if I think I'm not going to sleep well during perimenopause, I just have to bring it back and be like, well, I'm not there yet, and when I get there, I'll deal with it. So it's about just coming back to that present grounding moment. And you're right, when people aren't sleeping well, the tools they will go to are very much focused on sleep, when actually they need to be focused on reducing the hypervigilance in your system, telling your system that actually you're safe. And for a lot of us, if you are 100 miles an hour all day and you've got a lot on your plate and you're very stressed, the idea that you would just suddenly switch off for 8 hours and go into a deep restful sleep is unrealistic. Your body there's no part of your body there that's being told that this is safe. So we have to deal with those parts as well. And I think that mindset work is really important. The body work and the mindset work is a really important piece of the puzzle.
That's actually a really key part that people forget about, that transition between your day and when you get into bed. It's as if you're like, how are you meant to downshift immediately? And that's the thing that really I got into initially, was like that deeper somatic work, because I had to show my body safety cues. So it was the stretching, the vagus nerve activation, all them simple tools dotted throughout the day, because I couldn't go from a million miles an hour to zero in 1 hour. I'm not going to be able to downshift like that. It has to be a gradual thing. So, I think that's another point. We can't alleviate all our stress from a stressful day in 1 hour in the evening. We really need to interrupt it.
And I think, what you're describing there is the things that you did there reduced vigilance in your system, which enabled you to go to sleep. They weren't fixes for the sleep. They were the period before. They were the building block for the sleep. And I think that's the bit that people would need to focus on is, you can't be a million miles an hour all day and then just suddenly flick a switch and go off and turn straight off again. And it can't be this focused, my goal is to sleep. The goal shouldn't be sleep. The goal should be, I want to be grounded. I want my system to relax. I want to feel calmer. That's what our aim should be. And then sleep can follow. Because if we make sleep a goal, it's very difficult to make it happen because it's too focused. So if I say I want 8 hours of sleep tonight, I'm probably not going to get them. If I say I want to, wake up feeling more refreshed tomorrow, that's a better goal because it's about quality instead of the quantity. So really important to make sure that we're staying in the moment, that we're staying present with what we've got, not looking too far forward.
Yeah, that's very true. Take one night at a time is what I continuously used to say to myself. So just to finish up, if you could give one foundational principle, we've had a lot of really valuable ones in this, just for rebuilding sleep from when even now you could be in a deficit of just like half an hour suboptimal to what you could be having, or it could be a big deficit every night. But what's that one foundational principle especially for women?
So I'll give you two. I think the first one would be to just sit down today and pen and paper and write it down. Work out, what are you worried about? What is it that's happening? How long has it been going on for? Kind of just notice the changes, like where is this coming from and what's fueling it? So try and really understand, because I think that in itself is therapeutic, when you can say, okay, I'm starting to see that this is not my caffeine, it's all of this stuff instead. So write it down, get everything out of your head and start to make that list of what's real and what's hypothetical. What am I working with here? What is practical and I can make a change? What stuff do I have to just accept I'm worried about, but they're not happening? And then tonight, enjoy your evening, go to bed an hour later, set your alarm for early tomorrow morning and stick with it. Whatever happens, stick with it and keep doing that for a week or so and just see what starts to happen to your drive. So daytime, you're managing the fears, nighttime, you're resetting your clock. Those are the two things I would give anybody starting the journey now. It's not to say that's the whole thing, because if there's a lot of anxiety, you'd have to work more on that. But from a foundation, those are the two things that can start to make a difference. And don't check.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And even the commitment to that same morning wake up, even at the weekend, that was a big one for me. I had to continuously do it to really train my body into it. Kathryn, where can people find you?
So if you visit the insomniaclinic.co.uk, we've got lots of free information, free webinar on there as well. I also have a menopause specific course, so it looks more around hot flushes and the kind of stresses around anxiety around not sleeping. And feel free to drop us email questions or at the Insomnia Clinic on Instagram.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kathryn. Really appreciate that. That was a great conversation.
Thanks.
Kathryn, thank you so much. If the 3am wake up is happening to you too frequently, the Rebalance membership is made for you. Every month we focus on one piece of the nervous system regulation puzzle, we'll say. So sleep, cortisol, blood sugar, one small daily action already decided for you in the right order, nothing to figure out on your own. That's how the wake ups actually stop, not another sleep hygiene checklist. The link is in the show notes, and thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.